Hey, what's up, guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. An article just published on several platforms. I think one of the first ones that got it was express.co.uk, but since then, Medical Daily, Huffington Post, and others have picked it up. The headline reads, "Belief in God and perception of immigrants can be altered with magnetic energy, claims scientists." Another one here, "Directing magnetic energy into the brain can reduce belief in God, prejudice towards immigrants." And the Express.co article, same kind of thing. Scientists claim they can change your belief of immigrants and God with magnets. And you read through the article here, and basically they place these magnets on your forehead. It's called TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. And actually, there was an episode of a podcast. It's a very popular one. You may have heard of it. It's called Radio Lab. They did an episode on this called 9-Volt Nirvana, and they talked about transcranial, direct current stimulation. And, they had a reporter go out and do some tests and things like that. And people are online, and you can go even on YouTube here and look for people that make, kind of a do-it-yourself kit where you can create this TMS thing. So it's supposed to, help you with cognitive function and, higher brain activity and things like that. So, there's something to it. However, this is an interesting thing here because this is alleging that beliefs and ideologies can be changed with this stimulation of the certain parts of the brain. Now, this experiment was done at the University of York, Dr. Kais Izuma, and it was also conducted at UCLA. And they don't give great detail about what they did, but the part that really jumped out at me is, in particular, the Medical Daily article. I wanted to read for you this quote here. And basically what they did was they had people read a couple essays, one of them that is pro-United States and a second one that criticized the United States. And basically, they're saying it turns out that magnetic stimulation had a big impact on the participants' reaction to the critical author, making them more accepting of an immigrant with a critical view. And here's the quote here. This is by the Dr. Izuma. "We think that hearing criticisms of your group's values, perhaps especially from a person you perceive as an outsider, is processed as an ideological sort of threat," Izuma said in the press release. "One way to respond to such threats is to double down on your group's values, increasing your investment in them and reacting more negatively to the critic. When we disrupted the brain region that usually helps detect and respond to threats, we saw a less negative, less ideologically motivated reaction to the critical author and his opinion." Now, this is a loaded comment here. Think about what he just said. When we disrupt the brain's region that usually detects and responds to threats. Okay. So what they're saying basically is that when we shut off certain parts of your brain that detects threat, you become less negative, or you respond less negatively to criticism, and you're less ideologically motivated. So this just kind of bothers me because what we're starting to see here is this push scientifically, right? The scientific dictatorship coming out and saying that, we can change people's perceptions based on, electromagnetic or, whatever, these magnets in your brain. And the issue that I have, the biggest problem that I see with this is when he says the word negative. What does he mean by that? It seems to suggest that when you double down on your values, that's a bad thing. Now, on what foundation of moral basis is he using to determine that? It's just kind of like, well, I'm the scientist, I'm the smart one, I get to decide what's good, what's bad. And it's just sort of weird to me, Obviously, there is irrational responses to criticism. When you receive criticism, you can respond irrationally, or you can respond with emotion and things like that. And that's a real thing. I'm not dismissing that, but it is part of our sort of makeup, if you will. And, if you want to argue from the evolutionary side of things, which I don't believe in evolution, but it seems a little contradictory to me if these people, assuming these scientists are believing in evolution, it's part of the process of evolution to have that reaction or that part of the brain develop in that certain way to be able to house and process certain ideologies upon, various situations. So, what do you want to do? You want to suppress that because you think it's negative? I don't know. I'm having a hard time here accepting something like this in terms of just the experiment itself being ethical or moral. I get it. We're trying to understand the brain, etc. But that in itself, I think, has a bigger spiritual agenda behind it that eventually, you know, we might help some people with Alzheimer's or certain brain functional issues and things like that. That's fine. You know, yeah, research is great. It's helping people. Wonderful. But at the same time, anytime this sort of capacity is increased, the capacity for evil is also increased. And when I say evil, I mean control, you know, unwanted control. This sort of thing would be great for any kind of political or totalitarian power to promote this whole thing as, oh yeah, it helps brain function, at the same time killing the part of your brain that detects threat, when the threat might be that electric shock itself, right? So I don't know. I just have a problem with this. I see a lot of contradictions in thinking in terms of why they would do this. Just what's the agenda here? What's the purpose? What are we trying to figure out? You know, and beyond just helping people and, you know, understanding our brains and whatnot. And at the same time, I'm sure that there have been laboratory experiments that have gone way beyond this. This is just public information. I can't, you know, necessarily verify that for sure, but based on some of the declassified documentations for MK Ultra and stuff like that, I mean, we know that the government has been doing experiments with the mind and the brain and things like that for a long time. And, you know, there's also stuff like the God helmet, which supposedly gives you some sort of spiritual experience. And, you know, it hasn't been verified and repeated. But, you know, I've even seen TV shows, and I don't know which TV show it was. It was something on the Science Channel. And basically the scientist put electrodes on this person's head and, you know, gave her magnetic waves or whatever into her brain, and she basically had an outer body experience. And the person that was receiving this electromagnetic therapy or whatever it was said, I floated out of my body and I saw myself laying there on the table. And then the scientist said, see, we can scientifically induce these experiences. But I'm going, wait a minute, hold on. You're saying, oh, it's just a scientific thing, it's just a phenomena of the brain. But what's happening when this woman can see herself laying there from the ceiling, which is kind of what she was talking about? That's not just functions in the brain. There's something real there. There's a real perceptive thing going on there. So from, you know, from my perspective as, you know, a Christian and all that, I see that as, hey, you know, you're probably doing something where your spirit is being kind of kicked out or separated from the body unwillingly, right? Unwilling to the person. And, you know, I know God can do that. In the Bible, there's accounts of that. I mean, 2 Corinthians 12:2 talks about Paul going up to the third heaven, and he wasn't sure if he was in his body or not, right? He says, you know, whether out of the body, I can't tell you. I don't know, which is interesting to say the least. At the same time, you have John the Revelator. You know, he was taken to the wilderness in the spirit, right? So these things happen biblically. So there's a precedence there set in the Bible, but now you have these scientists shooting magnets into your brain, and people are having that experience of separating from the body, outer body experience, which is a real thing. You know, the New Agers really like that and, you know, try to help people learn how to induce that and things like that. So there's something there. And so I don't know, getting back to this experiment here with the TMS and the brains here, if you go to this document here, and I'll link to it, it's the neuromodulation of group prejudice and religious belief. This is actually the abstract and the introduction to the experiment. But the study here is based on 38 undergraduates. Okay, so the measuring of belief and things like that is difficult to nail down. You have to take surveys and a scale rate and stuff like that. These things aren't exact sciences. Okay, but in the media, they promote it like it's reality. Now, one of the things that is interesting to me, if you read through this document that they published, it says here, quote, according to this approach, the pro-U.S. immigrant posed no ideological conflict and hence did not elicit a significantly enhanced affirmation of group values, whereas the problem of death is not as effectively ameliorated, which just basically means to make better, by negative religious beliefs, i.e. relative to heaven, continued existence in hell presents a poor alternative to annihilation, and hence negative religious beliefs were not bolstered following reminders of mortality to the extent that positive beliefs were. So there you have it. Positive beliefs were reinforced or affirmed, whereas negative beliefs weren't. Now, again, I go back to this. Is the belief in hell a negative thing? How do you define that? You define that as a negative thing. Why? Because you think so? It's just very strange how they have automatically labeled something like a belief in hell as negative. Now, the existence of hell and going to hell, your soul being bound to hell, yeah, that's negative. But how can you say the belief in hell is negative? I don't know. It just gets into all sorts of philosophical quandaries that, these scientists just presuppose to perform their experiments here and try to prove that there you have it. These magnets can reduce a belief in God, which is rhetoric that's trying to push for an agenda here to go pro-science, anti-religion, and, you know, all that. So what do you guys think? Ethical? Not ethical? I know some of you guys watching this video will say, oh, it's good science. Gons needs a little, you know, magnetic shock on his frontal cortex. But no thank you. I do not want magnetic energy stimulation to reduce my threat response function in my brain. No thanks. Anyway, hope you guys have an awesome day. God bless.